Okay, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to Sunoikis' Digital Classics Summer Term 2021. This is our 14th session, and this is the first of the two final sessions of this semester. And these sessions are about digital Egyptology. And we have today the first session, which is more about material culture. Next week, we will have a session, let's say, more on philology and papyrology. But this session today, the guests of our session today are Rita Lucarelli. She's Associate Professor at the University of California, Berkeley. And we are very happy to have Rita today. This is the first time she joins Sunoikis' Digital Classics. So really, thank you very much for joining us today and for presenting your project for digital Egyptology. And we also have today Franziska Naether from the Saxon Academy of Science. Franziska has been contributing a lot to Sunoikis, and so she's back, of course, and she will contribute to the session also, and also for the discussion and for possible questions in the end. As usual, you have the class outline in GitHub, so you have the link. We have a description of this session. We have readings, the link to the project of Rita, and then also an exercise. And today the session is more about, let's say, material culture, because Rita will present her project, the Book of the Dead in 3D. So we will have a session about 3D visualizations, and also she will present a case study about a sarcophagus, which is on display at the Museum of Anthropology in Berkeley, California. But now, okay, the floor is yours, Rita and Franziska. So Rita, really welcome to Sunoikis. Thank you for joining us. And I think you can start. Okay, you have to unmute yourself.
Yeah, hello everyone. Oh. Thanks Rita, thanks Gavi for the introduction. I'm starting.
Yes, and sorry, Franziska, sorry. I said Rita, yes, it's my fault. Franziska is starting. Sorry, I was confused, so I have to apologize. So Franziska is introducing the session, and then Rita will present her project. Okay, Franziska, please.
Wonderful, thank you, Monica, perfect. And we will do it the same way next week, when we will, as Monica has already mentioned, a more philological session of Sunoikis. And for having these two parts of Egyptology presented to you this time, more the material culture, next week, dipping a little bit more into philology, we thought that we give you a bit of an introduction about these two fields in Egyptology to inform you about new developments. And some of you who are regular customers, returning clients of Sunoikis, know that I've spoken about these matters in the last years. And research goes on, development goes on, so it's time to give you an update on these things. Therefore, I have prepared a couple of slides saying something about the session and giving you a couple of examples, what has happened in the field so far. So before we dig a little bit deeper in the Book of the Dead in 3D, here you can see the session outline briefly. And this is also what you have in GitHub, and you have maybe read that we will deal with material culture and its output in 3D visualizations of ancient artifacts, and going into a case study, which will be about private tombs of the Third Intermediate Period and Late Period. Now I'm waiting that the slides are jumping. Come on. Otherwise, I'm just going back briefly and sharing it again. There we go. So we will have a late period example then following, and Rita will explain all in detail about that. Maybe you have already had a look into the seminar readings that we've been proposing to you, and you might have come across in the past also through this volume that Monica and I have been editing. Those were the proceedings of the conference that we did in 2015 in Leipzig, now already famous, Altertumswissenschaften in a Digital Age, Egyptology, Papyrology, and Beyond, where she was already presenting and preliminary version of our project, and also the Book of the Dead project presented in this form. And there's also an article about that in the proceedings. So check it out and see what has happened in 2015 and where we are right now. When it comes to digital Egyptology, and this is true for the philological part as well, there is still a way to go in editing the primary sources. There's a couple of initiatives and projects that work on making our sources available to a larger public, sometimes with open access. So that's, of course, always the way we want, since it's freely available to people all over the world with an internet connection. Some do have closed access where you have to log in, or where you have to pay, or where you have to pay partly to get access to sources. Some people use databases and tools which are also developed in an open form. That's what we call open source, or they sometimes make use of more proprietary databases where you have to make use of companies who provide such things, such as FileMaker. And another thing which is just beginning in Egyptology, in contrary to, for instance, parts of Near Eastern studies, and especially classics and archaeology in general, which are quite far on this road, is the road to standardization. That means to have vocabulary in the background, which are linked to your sources, to your find spots, to your timelines, to production techniques and everything. So you could basically standardize all kinds of topic, and I'm showing you in a bit an example, because if you're interested in doing a project in Egyptology or in other fields, it's always good to know about ontologies, thesauri, and vocabulary. And then, of course, you would hope to make your research, your data available to others, and this is done through linkage, through so-called APIs, to output your material in larger frameworks. The technology behind the Wikipedia has to be mentioned there. This is Wikibase or Wikidata, other infrastructures, or we have the large frameworks in some countries such as Germany, the UK, or the US, where you have national infrastructure such as the archaeological institutes, archaeological data services, and so on, who provide huge databases as well, where it's always desirable to have your material posted into. And this is happening at some extent as well in Egyptology, but we also have to say, and to conclude, and I went to a couple of conferences these days, that this is also still in the beginning. Two projects which are quite far advanced in that regard is something that has been presented here at Sunoikisis recently as well. Both of them actually have. Trismegistos, Janne Brooks was with us from Belgium a few weeks ago, as well as Pleiades. The colleagues are regular guests here in Sunoikisis, and please check out the sessions that refer to Trismegistos and Sunoikisis, those huge portals and aggregators of our field where information can be linked to. Right. And these tools can also be used to create your own database without huge efforts such as semantic media wiki and other techniques. There are also things going on if we look at the material culture to not just link things to each other, aggregate sources, have lots of images and things, but also to have a kind of a recognition by artificial intelligence working at the background. One of these projects, and that's quite interesting, is the Clio Database, developed by our colleague Helene Wielprink from the Netherlands. And I'm briefly showing you this. This is one of these softwares that is proprietary and is behind a login. So that's why I can't delve deeper into this with you. But the idea is that a lot of collections from museums give their images to the Clio database, and then an algorithm working in behind this database can point you out similar paintings, similar objects, or might detect elements in these images, in these objects that are similar, and can group objects to each other that you might not have found if you would go through a library and look through 500,000 museum catalogs in order to find all the instances of Roman mummy portraits or a certain type of statue or paintings, drawings on an ostracon. So this is the idea where we actually would want to go, to have artificial intelligence help us to find out similarities and differences. But this is still a long way to go, but that's something that's happening in Egyptology as well. Going back to the slides and moving on here. I'd like to show you also a couple of databases on different development standards at the moment. And let's take something local, since we're also tuning in from Leipzig here. The Egyptian Museum at the University of Leipzig has an internal database, which is not open access available via their website. They use FileMaker, but they have a website with an output for certain objects. And this one can be seen here. There is a section on the website called Objekte erklären, where PhD students explain during their study courses about certain groups of objects. For instance, in this case here, we do have parts belonging to a burial. Those are amulets that were found directly on mummies, and this is a set of objects, and students have described them. So this is something like an online catalog plus commentary that you can have. And this one has been done by Martina Grünhagen. We have one being done by Alexander Rost about Ptolemaic coins, and you can also click on them and enlarge them. And another one is done by Alina Grams on scarabs and objects focusing scarab beetles from the Egyptian Museum. So that is a way how you can make your material accessible. Another way to make things accessible and also to use these thesauri is to get involved with the Getty Vocabulary. So this is actually the most powerful vocabulary or ontology that we have in art history. This is why a lot of collections make use of it, and databases who work also with Egyptian material, with classical material. And I picked out something that I was involved with at Stellenbosch University together with Stanford University. There we've been collecting material that is basically coming from Greece and Rome, but also part of the reception of the ancient world and available in South Africa. So what you see in this project, which is more or less a digital exhibition. So first of all, that's the Getty Vocabulary. It's a huge website with many, many lists and linked also to the UNESCO, Thesaurus, and other huge players in that field. And this is the underlying principle behind this project from the Stanford libraries, where we have the South African material. And there you can see we have ancient objects, modern material culture featuring ancient objects or on the reception of these objects or objects of public discourse. So there's a lot to see, and what is underlying these objects is the Getty Vocabulary. So feel free to click through those. There's also some interesting stuff pertaining to current South African politics. Another way of making material culture available are a couple of other examples that I have mentioned here. A lot of European collections refer to the German Archaeological Institute, and there is a huge aggregator called Arachne, which has been revamped in the last years. And I briefly clicked through this as well to show you what kind of sources are made available here. First of all, Arachne, or IDAI objects, is the huge project behind that, with now more than 4.5 million entries. And there you can have anything from material from ancient temples, from objects in museum, until digital objects, correspondences between archaeologists, which is an important means for studying the discipline. And if you go directly on the IDAI website, and you can also have a nice overview to see that there are maps which link to the objects, which link to actual maps from the air, and have other monument registers and stuff. So if you want to do a project in that field, it's always good to get involved with these players, right? Quite recently, we do have a big player from the large museums who have added something to this. The British Museum has revamped its collection with a program called Research Space. So that's quite exciting. Try that out. And it has much better search terms right now. And another new player on the field is the Louvre, which also opened up its house and added a lot of material, especially also in the field of Egyptian antiquities, to its online collection. I've just randomly selected here a piece of textile from late antique Egypt. And also, if you scroll down, I'm not interested here at this point at the wonderful text hub, but just to show you that you do have all these indices with all the different categories. And as you see that I hover my mouse over it, you can see there's more behind it. So this links to the ontologies and everything. So this is one step what you can do with your collection, make your primary sources available. But if you want to go a step further from that, so to have people engage with your material, the specialists, your visitors, the students, I'd like to briefly refer to what the Metropolitan Museum of Art is doing, a player quite well known in this field and interacting with the public since many years. They just not only have the classical online catalogs, we can now say, but also do specialized curated online collections such as birding. So you can, if you click on this one, you can look at all kinds of artworks or other objects, artifacts that have birds in them. So you can go sort of virtual bird spotting, or other forms how they involve the public, involve bloggers, and involve people who want to do 3D scans. So this is the way forward in presenting museum material. So you have all these links in the slides that we're going to share with you afterwards. As a final thing, I'd like to mention a tool that my team and I at the Saxon Academy of Sciences and Humanities gained some experience in the last weeks. This is called Omeka-S. That's a tool developed by the Roy Rosenzweig Center at the George Mason University in Virginia. That's near Washington, D.C. That's a tool which you can use for collecting your material in a catalog in a database locally, or you can also put it on website, and you can also create digital exhibitions from it. We also tried out both of this, and my colleague Peter Mühleder actually programmed a couple of things, put a couple of extensions on Omeka, how to link the material to the history, to the correspondences, to reports about material analysis of the objects. And we are doing this currently with a late antique gold treasure from ancient Bulgaria, which is a very exciting project. This is not yet available, but what's available is, for instance, Classicizing Philadelphia. So that's a project that used Omeka. This is an open source free software in order to present elements of reception of the Greco-Roman world in the city of Philadelphia in Pennsylvania. So very interesting tool as well. So, and this is what I'd like to present to you, some new developments in the field. We have seen in the past weeks that COVID had, of course, an impact on working with material culture and further digitizing Egyptological material. So some had the opportunity, because they couldn't do fieldwork, to put quite an effort into digitization, whereas others were not able to have access to their workplaces, to their collection, and couldn't do it. And also people who wanted to gain material from the collections were not able to receive, for instance, photographs, because the curators were working from home as well and had no access to the material. So that's something that has been mentioned quite often at conferences these days right now. So the idea in an ideal world would be to have databases and working with material to embed many media, not just text corpora, blogs, but also maps, audio guides, curators, videos. That's what people also been doing, educational tools. Games is a big thing right now in ancient studies or sketchbooks, and something that Rita is going to tell us in a bit, to implement visualization tools of seeing these objects, not just in 2D, but by RTI photography or in 3D, and to get to the way to have really engaging digital exhibitions, which are really worth the title and not just a website with pictures. So, and with further ado, I'm handing over to Rita, coming back to the browser, and the floor is yours to present us your project.
Thank you, Franziska. Thank you, Monica, Gabriel, and the whole team of this Digital Classics class. And indeed, I'm happy to have another occasion to present my project, The Book of the Dead in 3D. But first of all, to speak about how this project is born, and kind of get back to what Franziska just told you about Egyptology and digital humanities. So I'm already sharing my screen, right? I'll just have my...
Yes, we can see your slides, Rita. Yes, thank you.
So we will talk later on about coffins, but first of all, I would like to mention to you something very important called digital revolution, namely an explosion of information technology, which is right now quite old. It has started in the 50s, and it has been changing the world, we could say, the world's economics and also the society. And it is also thanks to this digital revolution that we could use technologies for the study and preservation of cultural heritage, and also in Egyptology. And indeed, why Egyptology and the study of ancient Egypt is grateful to the digital revolution and to the application of technologies for the study of our artifacts is because we have a really rich material culture, also one of the better preserved. At the same time, in Egypt, we had widespread looting since antiquity, we could say, and still continuing. Right now, we have difficulties to study excavated material, which is now in on-site magazines, or we know about how limited is the access to some artifacts which are in magazines, indeed, of museums. Or also we could think about objects and monuments that are in Egypt and cannot be visited. So developing, for instance, apps like the really nice Dreaming the Sphinx app from Peter Del Manuelium and the Harvard Semitic Museum. You can check on the website of this app how that works. We'll not talk about this today, but this is, I think, is a great example to show how, indeed, thanks to technologies, we have now a different approach to the cultural heritage of ancient Egypt, and not only. So we also have a new figure, the figure of the digital humanist, and also Egyptologists now became a digital humanist. Who is the digital humanist? Well, first of all, who is a humanist? Probably many of you know Francesco Petrarca, was an Italian scholar and poet during early Italian Renaissance, and who is considered one of the first humanists. He rediscovered ancient documents, ancient literature, especially Cicero's letter, and he became a sort of really ideal for the humanist. Who is the digital humanist? Well, is someone who studies humanities, indeed, by using technologies, and so is we could say is a scholarly activity at the intersection of computing, digital technologies, and humanities. This is what digital humanities is, and this is what a digital humanist does. And so I like here to mention, to quote a passage from a book I love, the Lampedusa, Tommaso de Lampedusa Leopard. Everything must change so that everything will remain the same. And I'll let you think what this means when we think to digital humanities and our updated studies of the antiquities. So therefore, today, the use of digital humanities, in particular of 3D techniques, is widespread in Egyptology. We have many three-dimensional models of artifacts, as also Franziska has showed, various shape dimensions, small objects, big monuments, and you can find a very interesting website where to look at reconstructions of monuments from ancient Egypt. Digital Giza, digital Karnak are among the most famous examples, but we have many pages also on Sketchfab, also mentioned by Franziska, of Egyptian artifacts, for instance, from the British Museum and many other museums. So we could say that actually the 3D model with its annotations, and we will return on annotations, is a new medium. It's a new object separated from the original. So the annotations function, so the information on the model function as a tool for understanding, for educational interaction between the user of the model and the model's creator. So annotations are very important, but already just the 3D model in itself is a new medium. And with my project, I intended to create new mediums. So I don't think that those 3D models of the ancient Egyptian coffins that I produce are the same as the original, but they are media used to study the original. And so I call my project, not only my project, I work with a great team of students from UC Berkeley, other students from, I'll show you in a bit, our team members from other university, external collaborators. I call it the Book of the Dead in 3D. So it's a project I coordinate because I apply photogrammetry with this project to the study of the ancient Egyptian coffins. You can see here some of them that we realized. And in particular, we look for coffins decorated with images and text of the so-called ancient Egyptian Book of the Dead, which is a corpus of magical spells, ritual text, complemented by images that were intended as a tool of protection for the deceased, for the dead, and kind of worked as a sort of guide for the journey of the deceased in the netherworld. And so up to today, we collected up to 18 models that we have on the website available, and also an updated news, something new is that the Book of the Dead in 3D website page is now available also in Arabic, in an effort to value the use of this language in the Egyptological community. And here you see also the photos of some of the team members who helped also with the translation of the text of the website in Arabic. And indeed, as Egyptologists, we think that more efforts need to be done in sharing our research content with a wider community, including a primarily Arabic-speaking audience. And so this has been a real learning experience for our team member, using Arabic also to build the website. And my students have been working hard in order to get, first of all, photos of the coffins that are part of the project. We started with the coffins of museums in the Bay Area in California, near Berkeley, first of all in the Hearst Museum of Anthropology of UC Berkeley. Then we migrate a bit around. We went to the Museum of Man that you see in this photo in San Diego. And so the first step was documenting the original before creating the new medium. And this is not always very easy when you have to deal with big objects like coffins. And because of their size, indeed, only major museums with considerable exhibition space can host sarcophagi for a public fruition. You see here a gallery from the Metropolitan Museum where there is space enough to host, to have all the coffins, not even all of them on exhibition. and still many of them remain hidden in storage rooms, or even if on exhibition, it may be difficult to view the full object, which is placed very often horizontally, so the bottom is covered, or the window glasses prevent one from a close-up examination. And so therefore, to have a full 3D model also allows a better view of the object. And indeed, an ancient Egyptian coffin also was a medium for magical spells, images copied inside the coffin and outside, so interior, exterior, the bottom lid, all parts of coffin could be decorated, and it is therefore very useful to have those model available to look at the coffin. You see here one of those that we have in Berkeley at the Hearst Museum. You can even, since many of these coffins belong to the same owner, so we talk in Egyptology about nested coffin, one coffin inside the other, a sort of Russian doll system. You can, with the 3D, also put together the original coffin ensemble, like in this case, where the outer and inner coffin of EUFA at the Hearst Museum of Berkeley has been put together virtually. And we also have many beautiful coffins of women, by the way, women in the first millennium BC, and many of our coffins are dated to the first millennium BC, also possess beautiful coffins. While, for instance, if we look at those funerary papyri of the Book of the Dead, we first see papyri where the owner is a male and the wife of the owner is represented in the same papyrus. Only later we also have papyri of women with the coffins. The representation of women is even more widespread. And you see, for instance, here we have our Amenildis and how we realize this model. You see the face, the difference also between inner face with air without texture. So while building the 3D models of coffins, one can better also study how the coffin was made, the change in the expression before and after the final painting. Note also the nice little smile of Amenildis here. Beside helping with the analysis of the decoration, we use those coffins also to look at the features of those anthropomorphic and anthropoid coffins. And there are other projects, by the way, at the moment, focusing, using the 3D technologies to focus on this kind of analysis. Our focus anyways, mostly on the text decoration, because my project wanted to be mostly, mainly a philological project. And so focusing on the Book of the Dead, which is not what you see here. It's not the Book of the Dead that you see in the movie The Mummy, but is instead a collection of magical texts that you find on different kind of media. The most popular one is certainly a papyrus, but you find the Book of the Dead also on amulets, like the Scarab of the Earth that you see here, inscribed with a spell to protect the earth, on statuettes like these Shaktis, the servants of the netherworld, or even mummy bandages that had to protect the body even closer, and so they were inscribed with magical spells, especially in the later periods, in the Ptolemaic period. So how the Book of the Dead has been studied until now? Well, you can find it very cheap, translated, especially a classic is Wallis Budge. You can find it for, you see, on eBay for less than $10. But actually, those translations are based on facsimile only of papyri. And by the way, they are also outdated translations. We have new translation, better translation that from the time of Budge, but this Papyrus of Ani, for instance, is facsimile published by Budge, has been, and it still is very popular, especially in New Age or esoteric circles, still reactivating the ancient Egyptian religion. So the study of the Book of the Dead has been mainly philological and based on papyri. And here you see later translations, Faulkner and Quirk, the one of the most updated one, that also translate, for instance, the name of this collection, the Book of the Dead, with the Egyptian name. Going Out in Daylight is what the Egyptians said as a title of this papyri, Peretem Heru. And I've been working on the Book of the Dead for a long time, first in Bonn, where for 20 years there was a huge project, the Book of the Dead project, Totem Book Project. What we did was collecting many, up to 4,000 objects, most of them papyri, and put them then in an archive that is now available also online, the Totem Book Archive, where you can look for spells attested in different kind of sources, again, mostly on papyri. So this archive was mainly based on the study of papyri. It's why the study of the text, because we have so many copies of and variants of spells of the Book of the Dead that generally the translation and analysis of those texts follows the classical, the methods of classical philology. So you basically create a synoptical a version of one spell with comparing the different variants and look for the text which is more intact, less corrupted. And this kind of study is certainly very, very important, since it helps the understanding of the text. But this kind of edition, of classical edition of the Book of the Dead, does not give us a sense of the medium where those spells are attested, if it's on papyrus or on a three-dimensional object, how the text is adapted to the object, what is the materiality of the Book of the Dead, what is the materiality of the text. And materiality, the study of materiality is nowadays very important in religious studies, in Egyptology as well. So we can think about the Book of the Dead as a religious thing. So we have here a question on materiality of religion. So the Book of the Dead is a set of documents, of course, but is a visual phenomena. But it also belongs to different kind of media. So when we want to visualize, we have to visualize also the medium, not only the text. And here you see the difference between a facsimile of the text as seen in, if transcribed from the object, and instead how it is shaped around the object, in this case around a small statue of Shakti. Therefore, for instance, we can look at images like that, see all this text and think that this is probably, this text belongs to a bidimensional object like a papyrus, where generally the hieroglyphs are written in columns, in this sort of cursive glyph. But actually, for instance, this is a textualized three-dimensional object. It's a coffin of the first millennium BC, is one of those coffins we are looking for, because they are completely textualized. A colleague, Jonathan Elias, has been talking about coffin magic, coffin textualization. Indeed, the whole coffin is covered with spells. And those spells need to be studied on the object. This is why, by using digital humanities tools, 3D visualization, we can map the text on the objects. And thanks to softwares like Agisoft Metashape is the one, that we use. It was known first as Photoscan. We can create those new models, this new media, and work, for instance, in order to make this model really look great. Even sometimes I say better than the original, because you can, of course, Photoshop it. You can use, you can balance the color, the exposure, the highlights and shadows. And this, by the way, is a model that was made by an external collaborator of the project, Valerio Paolucci, who used to work with SciArc, which is connected also to Heritage, is a project, a company working on heritage visualizations. And this is indeed one of the coffins that we've been realizing 3D models. Another very nice one is the coffins of UFI. As you can see from this demo, the 3D model, thanks to having to realize the 3D model of this coffin, which was kind of abandoned in the storage room of the Hearst Museum in Berkeley. We discovered that it was, for instance, decorated also in the back. And in this case, as you can see, there are not many text, but those images are very interesting. We don't have time to speak about it here, but they are really peculiar for the genre of the Book of the Dead depiction. So this will be published. We try also to publish all these coffins, not only online with the annotations, but also then in printed article. And today, anyway, I will focus on one case study, as Franziska says. So I'll show you very quickly some other coffins. Another one is this one from an anonymous. You can see the text is just in the lower part of the lid of this wooden painted coffin, painted in black and yellow. And you see how, I'll show you better later, how you can add annotations with the transcription of the hieroglyphs, transliteration, which is the way we read the ancient Egyptian, and then translation as well. So this is what we did for each coffin. And this is our case study for today, a stone basalt sarcophagus lid belonging to an official of the 26th dynasty. So we are around 600 BC. Psamtik, kept also at the Hearst Museum of Anthropology at the University of California in Berkeley. And here you can see how we use the annotations. I believe annotated models are very useful, and the model in itself, as I said, is great, but from the educational point of view, not very useful. You can see here instead how we use the annotation, because when annotating the 3D model of an inscribed ancient Egyptian object, the major challenge is providing all the information in a user-friendly way, where one can interactively localize the image section to which each annotation refers, while rotating the model on the digital interface. And so you can create links between the annotations and the models that anyway have to be very clearly detectable. And indeed, in the exercise, I ask to look at this model and tell me what you note exactly, and first what you think is most important that comes out from the annotation. In this case, though, we are happy because we have, and I'll show you again, we have an object of which the archaeological context is very well known. So you see we have a tab for context, because for other artifacts, for other coffins, we don't know from where they come from. They were purchased. But in this case, we know the archaeological context. It's a well-documented tomb in Saqqara. So we have extended information on the whereabouts of the piece. Therefore, we have this introduction, including also bibliographical references to other colleagues who studied this piece. And beside the context, you can look at names of persons, you can look at the text, of course, and also we add a vocabulary and help tab, because in the end, it's not always completely easy to navigate a 3D model. Sometimes it's actually kind of harder, and we will need like a demo for that, but I hope you can also play with that on our website, where you'll find the 3D models, or we are also on Sketchfab, and I'll give you the link at the end of this talk. And so I'll show you more in particular the annotations for the text. As you can see, you can scroll down and see the whole translation of the text. And this was the most challenging section for our annotation, because the annotator here has to deal, as often happens when documenting ancient Egyptian scribed objects, with sections of script copied on the lid according to different reading directions. So in order to correctly map the annotations, they provide the transcription, transliteration, and translation of the text on the model, it is necessary to indicate each text section. So, for instance, in this case, we decided to label each different textual section according to their position on the lid. So we have front, right side, left side, bottom right, bottom left, and feet. And this is the terminology also used in studies of coffins. So I've been looking at main studies of coffins, like those of René van Barsem, Arco Willems, which provide excellent resource for the ancient Egyptian coffin-related terminology. And one can add then also more information. For instance, if the text has some parallel in earlier text, here we for instance, some of this text was part of the pyramid text from the 3rd millennium BC, and so we noted the pyramid text spells as well. And this was instead how the same sarcophagus was only transcribed and not translated around the time of its discovery. I mean, it was discovered around the 1900, and then this small facsimile was created, which I found indeed in Berkeley. But the discovery is back to 1900 by Barsanti and Maspero, transcribed again in the 60s in this short publication by Strauss. And the facsimile of this early publication alone could not render the materiality of the text and its intimate relationship to the object as it does when viewed and read through the annotations on the 3D model. So the annotations show how the text is completely embodied in its media, which is this 2 tones heavy lid which had to protect Psamtik's mummified body. And I'm not going to give you all the technical information about how we realized this model. Just know that actually we've been helped by Markian Nederov from St. Andrews University, which I wish to thank for having implemented the whole annotation system through a Java tool with 3D functionality, originally developed for 3D computer games. And indeed, computer games are the best, I think, digital artists as well. And thanks to, anyway, to the continuous progress of the technologies for 4D and virtual reality visualization, it's also possible to go further with visualization in 3D. And so to use annotations in VR apps that recontextualize the new medium, so the 3D model of the object. This is what I've been trying to do with sort of development of the Book of the Dead in 3D project, which became a separate project in itself. And in collaboration with my colleague Ellen Sullivan from UC Santa Cruz and Chris Hoffman from UC Berkeley, who is the project manager. And we call this project Return to the Tomb, contextualizing the Egyptian sarcophagus of Psamtek in a 4D visualization of the tomb and its environment at Saqqara in Dynasty 26. And so this has been quite a challenge. We did not launch originally the whole project, but I'll show you a little demo. Here again, going back to when we find out this beautiful sarcophagus lid in Berkeley. You see a photo of me with one of my students starting to take the first photos of the object, which was first in a storage room off-site of the museum, and then thanks to a crowdfunding campaign, Psamtek, you see his name here, and his title, we call him the doctor because he was a chief of physicians. He was, this was a very important title at the time, and he was also, anyway, military, important military official, a chief of the Libyans. Anyway, his tomb was found by Barsanti in 1899 in Saqqara, empty, totally undamaged, since never used for burial. So maybe Psamtik died abroad, maybe while fighting the Persians, and was buried near the battlefield. We don't know. And the tomb is inscribed with text as well. I'm waiting actually for the publication of the tomb by my colleague Ramadan Hussein, who is conducting an epigraphic project in the Saitic tombs of Saqqara. And indeed, I'll show you here some pictures of this tomb, because those have been useful for this new project, reconstructing the tomb of Psamtek to bring back Psamtik in the tomb, all virtually, all in 3D and 4D, and VR, of course. And so you see here some of the photos, some of them, I wish for some of them, like this one, the main photo here, I wish to thank indeed Ramadan Hussein for sharing those pictures. You can see how those magical texts also cover the old tomb. And you see here another photo, courtesy of Ramadan Hussein, of the space where the sarcophagus was contained. So we have an outer sarcophagus, which is still in Cairo, and what we have in Berkeley is actually the inner sarcophagus. And you can see here how narrow and small were those tombs, which were called shaft tombs, because indeed there was just a burial chamber at the end of a very deep shaft, around 30-meter deep shaft. And we found other objects belonging to the same person, to Psamtek, and to a subsidiary burial of Setiaret Binet, a woman, probably a relative of Psamtek. We had to scale and measure the tomb and the sarcophagus. That you see here another picture when it's been admired by visitors. We created a crowdfunding campaign to bring it back to the main gallery. You see here when Psamtek arrived in the main gallery, the new gallery was at the time still empty. And here again, just a translation of the text to show you what the texts say exactly. So basically, it was all about protection of the gods for Psamtek. So Horus, Nut, Geb, all the gods had to protect Psamtek once he arrived in Duduat in the netherworld. And so the new project, as you can see in this slide, starts from a visualization of the landscape, the necropolis of Saqqara, to the visualization of the tomb, and then to the sarcophagus. So the idea was to make the exploration, the study at multiple scales possible, contextualizing the sarcophagus of Psamtek in Saqqara. And for this project, we had this joint
Welcome
team.
to the ancient Saqqara necropolis.
You can hear
Saqqara was an important cemetery site that stood in the high desert.
But I'll let you now stop but anyway, we have also voice guiding the user of this app that is possible to experience through headset, but we will make it available also very soon on just iPad or tablet. So you enter first in the necropolis, and then you travel to the tomb of Psamtek until you enter the tomb. So this is just one of the first demos we made. As you can see, some texture is missing, is not complete at all, but what Ellen Sullivan and her team realized here, because they've been realizing the visualization of the necropolis, is make sure that the necropolis looked exactly as at the time of Psamtek. So not as it looks now, but the necropolis of Saqqara during the 26th dynasty. So as you can see here, at a certain point, you can descend into the tombs, and here in those kind of VR apps, you can add also documentation, scholarly documentation. This is a page, for instance, of the publication of Barsanti from 1900, so that you can add information indeed and make it as a real study tool and not just as a sort of entertainment like going in the tomb. At the same time, can be enjoyed as well as a sort of indeed descending in the tomb of Psamtek. And we imagine like this VR app, for instance, being available also in the museum in Berkeley, where someone look at the original, but then can also experience Psamtek in its original context. And as you can see here, this goes a bit fast, but we add the annotation so that one can still look at the text translation. And this Dynasty 26 Dynasty visualization of Saqqara has been realized indeed by Ellen Sullivan and her team of University of California, Santa Cruz. As I said already, the main aim was to embed the object in an historical place and time, signals that the object was one part of a complex series of funerary practices, reimagines the details of the original placement of the object, not apparent to the museum visitors. And so this is what we are still trying to do, let's see, through this app. And since I see time is running away, I'll go further. And you can see here other screenshots of the visualization of the tomb when it was in the making. So the team of University of Santa Cruz worked hard to realize the tomb. What instead, and you can see here how when it was scaled, the student team, instead of UC Berkeley, has been working on bringing the doctor back in his tomb. So basically adapt the 3D model that we already realized for the Book of the Dead in 3D project to the new VR app, which was developed with Unity, the software Unity, and by using also other software like Blender. So testing, trying to cut the leading portions in order to get interactions for the VR experience. with a lot of challenges. And the students you see listed here: Jessica Johnson, Nick Yerasi, Xiaoyan Kang, Mike Lee, Reed Scriven, and Savannah Dawson. Been doing a great job. You can see here also having fun measuring Psamtech now in the gallery of our Hearst Museum, and then working on Blender in order to adapt the 3D model to the VR app. So beautiful softwares, by the way, that are really fascinating to learn. And also try to virtually touch the sarcophagus. So those have been just some tryout to see what we can visualize now through Unity. And finally getting there very slowly, but now let's say we are waiting for the pandemic to be done, to have also an event at UC Berkeley with the demo and have people coming over and try with the headset the whole app. So here you can see still our student work. And so to conclude, more in general, what we learned from this project is how to deal with the primary sources, research materials when we are working with 3D visualizations. First of all, which data can be digitized? Not all of them. Some of them are too fragmentary, or they result to be biased. How important are big data? So excavating the field notes and photographs, integrating non-digital data in order to contextualize archaeological objects, very important. So social, religious, historical frame of analysis. Having the 3D models as data. No? I talk about medium, but they are also data, and how to distinguish them from primary sources, so the objects. Visualize, analyze the metadata, so the importance of the annotations I already told you about. Issues of data sharing, preservation, and copyrights, very important. For sure in this project, you need a data manager, and we had Chris Hoffman did a great job for us. Make sure that the technologies don't get obsolete for preserving the whole project. And also think about your audience, because the audience that can access this content online is not the same that access books in a library, is less specialized. And so the information has to be really clear for all kinds of online consumers. And so speaking about the application, not only of 3D, but also 4D VR to Egyptologists, we also have to ask ourselves, what are we creating? Are we recreating the real past? Or are we working, recreating a sort of our own versions of the past? The digital archaeologist Maurizio Forte has been talking about potential past, and I like this idea of potential past a lot. So when, for instance, did Peter Manuelian's project of Digital Giza try to reconstruct the opening of the mouth ritual, one of the main rituals from ancient Egyptian funerary religion, or when we have reconstructions of tombs, even in video games, like in Assassin's Creed Origin, or we walk virtually in an Egyptian tomb. You can see here myself in the tomb of Nefertari, also in Harvard. What are we looking at? What kind of past? Is this the potential past, or is this an hyper-real past? And with this open question, I thank you for your attention. I say hi to everyone on YouTube as well. Here are the links. You can find us at 3D Coffins Berkeley EDU for our website with most of the 3D models available, but also on Facebook and on Sketchfab. And on Sketchfab, you can also download the models and play with those. So thank you. And
thank you, Rita. Okay, Rita, thank you very much for this wonderful presentation and these resources. So, Franziska, I'm not sure, did you want to add something?
We just like to go briefly back to some points that we like to mention, the literature. So I'm sharing my screen.
Okay,
Once
here
again.
it is. Yeah.
Back. So if you're keen on reading more about what we've just been talking about and all these interesting questions she brought up also about what kind of reality we're creating, there is two articles we'd like to draw your attention to. If you do not have access to those through your libraries, please ask us and we can provide you with the PDFs. And another thing is, of course, the link. Rita has mentioned that as well, and you have it in the presentation. And then we like to briefly outline the exercise for you. There is a link to one sarcophagus in the Book of the Dead in 3D in the database in Berkeley. Please go to this one. That's the sarcophagus of Psamtek. And the task is to write down in one paragraph what you think is the most important information that the annotations on the model provide. And you can also give feedback if there's more you'd like to know or some information that you're missing to give back as feedback to Rita and her team. And of course, we like to see you back again next week, but that's something for next week. That's all I wanted to show coming back to the browser. And we're happy to see your questions.
Okay, Franziska, thank you. So now we can open our discussion. We have more than 20 minutes for questions. So please, and also our audience on YouTube, you know that you can write your questions and we can read them and possibly answer them. So in the meantime, when you think for possible questions, okay, so let's see. We have, well, of course, we have our audience and, okay, so, okay, thank you. Yes, Sakara 3D, this is wonderful. And then we have also comment from our colleague from Brazil, Anise Ferreira. One question. Okay, so is the vocabulary attached to a larger digital lexicon and is the information presented as images or characters?
Yes, thank you. Good question indeed. So our dream would be actually to have all the text and glyphs also connected to, first of all, Unicode, so being searchable, and then connected, for instance, to the thesaurus of lingua egizia and bigger lexicons. But we are not yet we didn't reach that scope, and for now they are, as I said, Markian Nederoff, who has been developing the first visualization of those annotations too, is using a Java tool to see the glyphs. So he's using his own system, so as images and characters, basically. So they are still not searchable, unfortunately. And those translations are our own translations, but we are inviting colleagues to be editors and annotators of those coffins that we produce in 3D.
Yes, I think this is an important comment because that's it. So your project is producing a lot, and that's the thing. So because you have text-bearing objects, but there is a component which is the material component and the textual component. And of course, one project can't deal with everything. We have been talking a lot about annotations of text, of inscriptions, of course, but here we have something more. So, and this is important. So involve the community, okay, also for annotating this text and for adding other information about the linguistic annotation, not to speak of Unicode problems that we know, in Unicode issues that we know for hieroglyphs. Which is still a problem and something also
yes.
that we have. Yeah, we know, yes. Yeah. So, yes, Gabby, please.
Hi, yeah, no, I really enjoyed that. I was very excited by all the work you were doing with both imaging, 3D scanning various objects and remains, and then the reconstruction, the visualization that you were doing, especially in the VR versions. And I was trying to sneak a look at the VR, but you finished speaking too quickly, so I'll look at it later. But I was curious as to the intersection between parts of the buildings, the monuments, and so forth that you imaged, and parts that you had to reconstruct, parts that you extrapolated from that, or you built from historical knowledge as opposed to surviving antiquity. And did you attempt to communicate the difference between those two different kinds of monument in your 3D models, or in some other documentation alongside them? And how would the reader or the viewer, the user, see which parts are from you and which parts are actually still there?
Yes, thank you. Another great question, and indeed it connects to the end of my presentation with the open question: what are we reconstructing? Because I think right now it's also important an ethical approach with what we reconstruct, and make sure that the user knows what is really there on the original context and setting, and what instead has been kind of added by our VR, virtual reality visualization. I think right now what we are trying to do with this VR app is make sure to really give all the information in separate files, and we are indeed also, because of that, also writing together with Ellen Sullivan a series of articles devoted to the archaeological context and the real setting of the app. We have a couple of forthcoming articles. So in the hope indeed that the user will be first interested in this chief of the Libyans and Dr. Samtek buried in Saqqara, and then maybe be interested in reading more about what exactly is being found and why the necropolis looks in a certain way. There is anyway a practical challenge and difficulty in this kind of work, which is that we can't have all the data on our own. We have the coffin, but the sarcophagus, but we don't have the data of the tomb decoration. So we have to wait for our colleagues to publish those. And sometimes, of course, it's nice to be able to collaborate, but sometimes, let's say, scholars have different agendas, and so give priorities to one tomb to the other, for instance, for the project. So until we don't have certain data, we cannot even dream of reconstruct the tomb as it really was. So as it looks now in this demo I showed to you, as you can see, it looks like the walls are completely naked, while they are not. And so yes, but we cannot really help that for now. We have to wait. So, but I think it's better to just provide whatever you have. In the meantime, the beautiful thing of publishing online is that you can keep editing. And so once we will have more data, we will add those data. And I guess it's just important that to tell the user what you're looking at is partial. It's a partial view of the real monument.
Can I also ask, the articles that you mentioned, are they addressed to other historians, other archaeologists, or are they addressed to people who might have access to the 3D files themselves, to modelers, to thing? And do you imagine different documentation for different audiences, including perhaps general public, because people who know nothing about this might enjoy the VR?
Exactly. Like, for instance, we are using the Sketchfab page for the most popular dissemination
Right.
of the 3D models. There are no annotations there. But then there is a link to our project where one can read the text. And so certainly, I think since I start to work at this project, I also learned how important it is, as I said also in one of my slides, to think about your audience, because when we write traditional, scholarly, philological publications, we give for granted that those who will read it are specialists like us. And so we don't really need to think that there is a part of the audience that maybe wants to read that as well, wants to look at it, but doesn't have that kind of specialized knowledge for understanding everything. Still, it's an important, I think, job for us to be able to communicate also to an audience that maybe wants just to enjoy the 3D model and is a way to approach ancient Egypt. So yeah, definitely it's nice to, easier, I would say, to have different kind of platforms for these projects.
Yes, thank you for these notes, because, well, the first one about what is the site we have now and the real one. Well, it's so the potential past also. This is a philological question, but in the broadest sense, because reconstructing the past is always potential. So we have been discussing this a lot, and I think that in this case we really have a nice example. And then for the second note about different audiences, we also have a comment and a question in the chat. So your Anise is noticing that in your group, in one research group, you have 4 experts in computing and 1 Egyptologist. Okay, so I think this is interesting, because not only we have to write papers for different audiences, we have now to teach in a class with students with different backgrounds, but also in our research teams we can have different experts. So I think this is, so this question, is that a necessary proportion?
No, definitely. Great question again, because I didn't mention probably that in this kind of teamwork, you cannot work just with Egyptologists. You really need the computer science students were necessary, were like fundamental for our work to develop the VR app. And the Egyptologist was one of my graduate students who's been coordinating how to deal with the text and with the implementation of the hieroglyphic text and transliteration. But the computer science students were those who could really create the visualizations. So it's definitely in digital humanities, you cannot work just with humanists, but you need to really an interdisciplinary team that's necessary.
Yeah, and this is where we learn to communicate, so with other fields, to explain what we need, and to learn also to use these tools, but especially in the digital humanities, definitely we have to use, we have to learn the logic of a different medium, which is the digital medium, the computational medium, which is not the printed one or the 2-dimension one. And there is also another question in the chat. Amanda, okay, is asking about the correlation between the content of the text and the location on the coffin.
Yes, yes, nice question too. Sometimes I have the feeling that some texts are really chosen and some images are chosen for specific parts of coffins. And right now, one of my graduate students is working on a dissertation on coffins from ACMIM, Kia Johnston. Those are also textualized coffins, and she's studying also which spells appears in which part of the coffin. For instance, we were looking at spells to protect especially some body parts, which are generally in the lower part of the coffin, so maybe because that's where indeed the legs of the deceased need to be protected, maybe against snakes that could enter the tomb and attack the mummy. And here we could go back to the time of the pyramid text, 3rd millennium BC, where those anti-snake spells, for instance, were also placed in specific parts of the tomb, like where the mummy could be, the mummified body could be attacked by those snakes. So the placement of text in relation to the object or the tomb wall, the monument, is very important, and it connects very well to my discourse on the materiality of the text, how it's important to know where the text comes from, which you don't see from a synoptic analysis of the variants of the same spells. So you need the visuals there to really understand it.
Okay, thank you. Again, this is another important thing. We have been discussing that a lot for digital philology, also for citations. There are projects for citing images and portion of images. In this case, I think this is really fundamental because you can cite the text, and we know that we have criteria in philology in general for citing the text. But then if we can align these texts with a precise citation of a portion of the image where we have the text, in this case in the coffin, this is really important. And today, digital philology is offering interesting tools for machine-readable citations of the text and of the text-bearing object where the text is, preserving, or maintaining, preserving, keeping the needs of philology. So there is a lot of work in this sense in digital philology for producing machine-readable citations, but also human-readable citations. And I think this is again another wonderful example, especially in this case where you need really the materiality is extremely important to understand the text, okay, where the text was written. Okay, are there questions?
Yes.
Well, yes, please, Franziska.
Yeah, just a comment following up on this, and also Rita, because you mentioned that there are quotations of other texts, such as the pyramid texts, which are way older in the Book of the Dead on the sarcophagi, and the main place to go in Egyptology, among others, and this will be subject next week, but I don't want to make this a spoiler, is of course the TLA, the Thesaurus Linguae Egyptiae, and they do work on this. They do have interfaces which they have internally where all this is possible, this good ideal word, but this is not yet in the output available online for us. But this is definitely work on progress, and also annotations on a linguistic base with the Leipzig glossing rules to annotate the different word classes and the syntax and so on, which would lead us on the way, which we still have to do in Egyptology, to tree banking, which is of course something that's been featured for Greek and Latin here in Suneikisis as well. But for Egyptology, this is still something that is a desideratum, and also something that we are currently perusing in the Digital Rosetta Stone project.
Yeah, we need a tag set for that. Yes, again, asking our community to contribute to this. So we need definitely a tag set. But this is good, so we can be optimistic. There is a lot of work for the future. So, and another thing. So, Rita, thank you very much for citing The Leopard, because this is a book I love too, and of course the famous for Italians, I think, so that everything must change for everything to remain the same, which is definitely an important quotation also for us, for philology. So this idea, so in the end, the same, we have always the same questions for our ancient objects. But you also said that these 3D models are different, of course, from the original. They are better, you said, also because we can play with them, and then of course there are many other possibilities, and definitely in this situation, for example, we can visualize these objects in the pandemic. So this is an example, but also many other examples where we can't visit an archaeological site or a museum. But my question is, okay, we are changing everything, but our questions are always the same, but our perception changing everything. And this is also a question for the students, because we are, I think I can say that, old enough to remember a world where we had to study these objects just with pictures, maybe black and white pictures, or sometimes without pictures when we were students. But today there are these possibilities. But our perception, I know that this is a very big question, an open question, but how do you see our perception of these objects changing everything? And especially for the students, given that you have students in your classes using these tools, playing with these 3D models, what do you see? How do you think about that?
Well, I think actually what I see in the new generations is that they have such a natural attitude in playing with those, we can call them copies, but at the same time being really aware that those are copies and are not original, and so still being really enthusiastic about going to Egypt, for instance, or go to the museum and see the original. So I really see it as a sort of new frontier in our studies, and training students to really use technologies to understanding the past, but at the same time being aware that what they are creating, and maybe I should not say the 3D model are better, but they're just easier to use than the original, let's say, in the present conditions. So I believe that I feel very optimistic in a future of humanities in which our students become all digital humanists, and through the digital humanities, they learn to love, respect, and value the cultural heritage, the original, to protect it. That's how I see it. And we could talk, of course, also of a discourse on restitution, decolonization of the knowledge by using the technologies, by sharing widely, by accessing all what has been hidden for a long time. This is all what they are learning through the technologies. And therefore, I think what is happening is actually beautiful, and we should all support it. I don't know if this answers your question.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And also thank you for mentioning this last aspect about hidden things and preserving them. We know that there is a big debate today, especially in museums. How much can we show? How much can we exhibit? There were interesting examples in the British Museum, in other museums, also in Leipzig, we can mention that, in the Petri Museum in London, and also in the Egyptian Museum in Turin, where we had an exhibition, Invisible Archaeology. So thanks to these technologies, we can show, we can explore, but at the same time, preserving the object, not destroying the object, and then respecting the object, because of course, when we talk about coffins and mummies, there are many other...
And it's nice to include the study of the text, you know.
Exactly. And also including also those two components, okay, the archaeological and the philological component. Okay. So our time, we have 1 minute for one last question, if there is a question. Yeah, Gabby, do you want to say something? Yeah.
Sorry, I'm not sure if this is a question. Maybe it'll turn into a question, but I'm glad that we've been talking about the intersection between object and text, and the thinking about the study of these objects as philology, because that really ties in with the way I think about. I mean, I'm talking about documentation again, the same thing I was asking about earlier, but in textual studies of historical texts and so forth, we would never now imagine publishing a text without an apparatus criticus. Okay? Every single text has this, and it's completely embedded in the text, and every single scholarly editor knows what an apparatus criticus looks like and knows what to find in another text. And what I feel is we don't yet have is a really a clear understanding of what an apparatus criticus looks like for a 3D model, or for an archaeological site, or for a reconstruction. And so we have we can attach commentary to it. We can write an article about it. We can put annotations in Sketchfab. We can do things like this. But an apparatus criticus that everyone would understand what it means. Several people have tried to recommend such things. There's the London Charter. There's the Scotch Ontology. There's the 4D Lab recommendations, and probably others that I don't know of. But do you think we should be working towards a place where we can document things in a way that anyone who's used to reading 3D models would know what to look for? And do you think it's possible?
Excuse me, could you repeat? At the end, I kind of lost you. My audio was, I think it's because of the internet connection. You were saying, if I think that...
well, I just wonder if that sort of, if we can take that analogy between the apparatus criticus and documentation of the model, as far as maybe I was trying to suggest we should, can we ever come up with a standard for documenting the scholarly interventions in a 3D representation that all 3D scholars will know how to read? Or
yes, I think this could be done through collaborations. Yes, I think my connection is kind of unstable right now, and I hear you. It's kind of broken, but I think I understood what you asked, and I think we could do that through collaborations, more interdisciplinary collaborations as well. It's kind of hard anyway, I think, to coordinate work between many colleagues. Can you hear me? Sorry.
Yes, Rita. Yes. No, we can hear you.
My
perfectly.
Connection is not working properly. Can you hear me now?
No. Yes.
Okay. So probably it's only my computer. But yeah. Yes. So, okay. I'm not sure.
No, I think yes. We lost. We lost.
But just to finish with this question, I think yes, it's possible. It would be very important to do it, and
Okay, we lost the two final words, but I think that in general, but I think that from your presentation was quite clear that definitely was the goal. So to involve the community of scholars for adding those interpretations. I can add one thing, that from a technological point of view, from a computational point of view, will be possible in the future, in the sense that, for example, for annotations also of text-bearing objects, this is something that is possible to do. So to add different alignments, for example, when we have the picture of the coffin with the text, then we can align different transcriptions of the text, different reconstruction, different translations of the text. So we have today the infrastructure for something like that. Of course, this is a work that requires time, and of course, yes, time in both from a computational point of view and from a philological, scholarly point of view, because definitely we need more scholars contributing to it, and maybe we can mention that. Also, let's say, a world where we can assess this kind of work. We are still fighting a bit with these editions where we have more editors contributing together. So this is something that has been happening in the community, but still producing digital editions digital critical editions also of text-bearing objects is something that is happening slowly for various reasons, but maybe in the future will be more frequent, and there are various problems in this sense. But from a computational point of view, this is something that is possible. We can do that. So we have standards for that, and so on. Okay, so but our time unfortunately is really over now, so we have to finish. So really, thank you, Rita, thank you, Franziska, for this wonderful session about, well, digital Egyptology, but digital philology, digital humanities, because today really we have seen a wonderful project with really fundamental questions for cultural heritage and for philology. Next week, we have our last session of this term, but we have another session about Egyptology. Well, we will see again text-bearing objects, but of a different kind, because we will talk about papyri, and we will have as our guest, Franziska again. She will introduce the session, and we'll discuss the session with Susanne Töpfener from the Egyptian Museum in Turin, in Torino, presenting the Turing online, the Turing Papyrus online platform. So we will talk again about objects, in this case papyri, bearing text, and so we will see other problems concerning the digitization of ancient texts for Egyptology. Okay, so again, thank you very much to our guests, to our audience. You have the class outline in GitHub, and so good afternoon, good morning to everyone. So we have a big audience everywhere in the world, and see you next week. Okay, bye-bye, ciao.
Thank you, bye.